My name is Carmen Cawthon, and this is Your Voice, Loud and Clear. 3 weeks after Martin Luther King was assassinated, my family moved into an all-white neighborhood. The rumor at the time was that there was a black family moving in with 8 kids and property values were going to tank. The day of moving, my mother pulled up in her station wagon with my brother and myself and 6 of my cousins. The rumor was fulfilled. We learned that you come prepared for the fight, but you don't have to be loud when you fight. I was the only girl in the neighborhood for a couple of years, and I became a tomboy. But one of the things that happened was I was lonely. I didn't really feel like I had a place. And so I got quieter and quieter, and I became a bookworm. My voice used to be inexperienced and uncertain. I internalized pain and loneliness, but I come from a strong, proud people, and so I didn't share that with anybody, and the loneliness intensified. And that's part of why I love to read books today. When I was a child, I spoke and acted like a child. I was seen and heard, but I watched what other people did, and I learned from it. I grew and matured physically, mentally, and through the use of my voice. Today, my voice is firm but gentle. It's in how I dress and how I talk, in what I accomplish and who I spend time with. My voice is commanding and nurturing, and all of that is part of who I am. The results from the voice that I've developed are that I can speak with authority about personal knowledge, and I'm heard and respected for what I say. I can talk to people in any generation. I can hear and respect where they are coming from, and I know that they will hear me because I'm not shouting to be heard over them. I am heard even when I'm in disagreement with other people. And I'm open to finding common ground or a place where there's something to share. I always look for the humanity in others, even if I don't like what they do or say. Partially because God requires that of me, but because I know we are all made from the same place. I'm a true friend and a valued source. People trust me to tell the truth, whether it's hard and painful or whether it's easy and light. And I tell it with compassion because I've been through some hard places, but I haven't let those hard places make me hard inside. There are 3 things I want to teach you. Number 1, what's your end goal? What's your end goal in life? What's your purpose? What legacy do you want to leave behind? Because you will leave one. There'll be a legacy for your family and friends, a legacy for your community, and a legacy for the world. And your voice will determine what your legacy is. Number 2, you need to train your voice. You've been doing it all of your life. Does your voice sound like the purpose and legacy that you're planning to leave? Just like training your mind, body, will, and emotions, you have to train your voice. Your voice is a combination of all of the parts of you. You didn't grow up overnight. And so just like an athlete is training their body constantly for the race you're running, your race is your life, and your voice has to be trained. And number 3, speak with your voice. If you stay silent, then that's what you're going to leave behind you as your legacy. Practice does not make perfect. It makes it better. Perfection freezes us up and keeps us from moving at all. You're known by your voice, so make each step count. Okay, lesson number 1. What's the end goal for you? The legacy for your family and friends? How does that work? If you haven't been diligent about that voice, you need to start that now. Your voice speaks volumes whether you say anything or not. Do you take time for family to do things together? Do you speak life into your family? Do you encourage them? Do you tell them that they're doing well? Or do you tell them that what they say isn't worth listening to? That their ideas or thoughts are stupid? Do you do that to the point where they don't bring things to you anymore? That's your voice. Do you stop when your kids or your spouse ask you to, when they want your attention? Or do you tell them you'll have to wait and then never get back to them? I came home on disability in 2011, and I realized that I had never been home for a summer vacation, and my oldest child at that time was a sophomore in high school. I missed a lot because of my career, and we had lots of discussions around that. The legacy you leave for your community. Do you reach out to other people? Do you reach out to organizations? Do you call people, or do you just click like on their Facebook post? Do you reach out to the humanity in others? Do you share what you know? Do you share what you have? And do you speak out about things that either impress you and that you like, or do you speak out about injustices that you see or hear about? That's your voice. Sometimes we silence our voice because we don't want to be seen or heard as this or that. Your legacy for the world. Are there things that you see that you want changed in the world? And if there are, what are you doing about them? Sometimes we think we can't do anything because we don't have a lot of money. But we don't have to have a lot of money to make forward-moving steps. So we have to think about, what can I do within the place that I am? That's your voice. We need to use our voice to accomplish the purposes that we were put here for. It's your goal, it's your voice. Nobody else can voice what you know and what you've learned and what you've had to deal with. Other people have their own voice. I have to fight racial inequality because that's the biggest part of my purpose on earth. Nobody else can tell my story but me because they're my truth, and that's my voice. If your voice has been weak or puny, mean or harsh, drippy, sweet, or sarcastic, and you really want it to be something else, you're going to have to dig deep. Change doesn't happen overnight, and it might not make some of the people around you very happy. But if part of your end goal is to do and be the best version of you, this will totally be worth the work. Let's work on the description of what your voice sounds like now. Think about this in your head and write your answers on a sheet of paper. You have to be brutally honest. There's no right or wrong answer because this is about you and who you really are. So this is what I want you to think. My voice sounds like or is, and I'm going to read some words. Okay? Authoritative or unreliable. Trustworthy or unconvincing. Reassuring or discouraging. Courageous or scared. Joyful or angry. Serious or flippant. Cheerful or hopeless. Excited or bored. Mature or inexperienced. Immature or developed. Childish or sensible. Polite or rude. Friendly or disagreeable. Confident or uncertain. Respectful, sarcastic. These aren't the only ways that our voice can show up. If you have other thoughts or other words, then write those down as well. Now you have to be really brave. Find a friend that you really, really trust and ask them to answer that same question about you. This has to be somebody that you know is going to tell you the truth, because what you hear might not feel good to you. Don't take a long time to do it. Fear hates movement, my coach says. So go ahead and get it done. All too often, we're only told what we want to hear, especially if our voice is loud and controlling. And I can tell you that because although I'm gentle and kind, I can be loud and controlling. At one time or another, I have been all of the things on that list. I've learned when to be each one through experience and necessity. When I had a job that had health insurance and somebody in my family was sick every month, I was sensible and respectful because I needed the paycheck and the insurance, as well as the retirement check that was going to come down the road. When our son was killed, the same week they told us that our middle child had scoliosis and was going to have surgery quickly in the next couple of months at the latest. And our youngest child was, according to a psychologist, mentally retarded. I was angry, uncertain, scared, all at the same time. But I had hope and I was joyful because I know the God I serve. When I had a child with a serious, rare staph infection in her back, having to take her from surgery at one hospital to surgery at the next hospital, I was serious and scared, but I was mature and I wasn't screaming because I had to hold it together for her and the rest of the family. Lesson number 2, train your voice. I was diagnosed with a rare disease in 2009, pulmonary hypertension. I was on oxygen 24/7, and I decided to keep working. We needed the health insurance, and I didn't think that we could afford for me to come home. My doctor encouraged me to do it, but what the doctor can do and what you can do are two different things sometimes. I finally decided to take a break for 6 months on short-term disability. I loved my job and the place I had worked, but it was changing. I was frustrated with things I was having to deal with every day. My voice was depressed and resentful. And they weren't that way when I was at work, but when I got home they were. And those things weren't on the list that I just read either. But I didn't think I could take care of my family. I found out, though, that we could survive on the disability payments. And so I didn't waste any time in leaving. I found out one week and I started packing up my stuff. I figured out what paperwork I had to do, and I said I was going to go for 6 months to take care of me. And I reassured my boss that I was coming back. But I completely cleaned my desk out and I wiped off everything that I had personal on my computer. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was making preparation for my voice. I didn't realize it, but I was. You can die with an unfulfilled voice. It takes courage and the willingness to change to be able to step out and find your voice and use it. Is there something you need to do? Is there something that is a little step or a big step for you to find your voice? Part of training your voice is to shut down the voices that you hear. Voices of other people, voices of fear, voices of I'm afraid to do this, voices of people who aren't going to be happy with what you decide to do. It doesn't mean that those other voices are bad, but they're not necessarily your voice. So you need to listen to your voice. Way too often, I stayed at work making sure that everybody around me had everything that they needed. And then when I came home, I made sure that everybody at home had everything that they needed. I would miss family events at work. I would miss dinner. I would miss homework time. I would be up washing clothes and doing all that kind of stuff 11 and 12 o'clock at night, and then getting back up and going to work the next day. But I was determined that my family wasn't going to miss all the stuff that I thought had to do with being a mom and a wife. I was trying to be super mom. Do you ever do that? I mean, try to be super, you fill in the blank. In the process, you end up pleasing no one. Is that part of your voice? Pleasing no one? Is that part of who you're supposed to be? If it is, do you want to keep it that way? If not, you have to figure out a way to change that. And that takes some work. So one of my favorite sayings is, the answer is always no if you don't ask the question. I used to do it all the time. I used to do everything myself. I never asked anybody for help. I figured my kids were busy doing schoolwork and growing up. My husband was busy working. I just was ashamed or embarrassed to admit that I needed help. That's part of the strong family that I came from. Finally, I learned that that was a negative tone of voice. I helped everybody, whether they needed it or not. So it was okay for me to ask for help. And I've learned to do that. I've also realized that I love to help others. That's another part of my voice. I could be at home. I could be at school. I could have been doing PTA. I know a lot of things. And so a lot of times that's part of my voice. That is definitely part of my voice. And so when I learn things, I want to share that with other people. But you have to learn how to temper your voice with your needs. I hate inequity of any kind, but especially racial inequity. All of that is also part of my voice because it's part of my experience and it's part of what I can share with others. I've learned to speak out. I don't necessarily march in the streets, but I speak my mind. I speak my mind where it makes a difference. If it's one-on-one, teaching somebody about things that I've had experience with, or if it's on social media, sharing, writing stories, telling, this is what happened to me, this is my experience. That's part of my voice, and I am known as a truth teller. So what I say gets heard. I learned that from the legacy that I was taught. Remember where I started from? My mom and the station wagon and the 8 kids. We learned to tell the truth, and we learned to make people appreciate the truth that we told. I had to train my voice to be used that way because remember, I was lonely and I felt alone. So I had to train my voice to speak up. I didn't always feel like that was something I could do at work. Most of the years I worked, I was the only African American in my office. And it was a political office. So I didn't always feel good enough. I didn't always feel like I did everything that I needed to do, even though I know in my head that I was doing above and beyond other people. But sometimes in your heart, you don't feel that way. So my voice had to have a presence, a commanding presence. I had to be sure of what I was doing and be sure of what I knew. And a lot of times I had to be better than other people to stay in the same place. There were definitely times when my voice had to be courageous and speak out and speak the truth and teach the people in my office when they didn't understand something that was happening out in the world because they didn't have those experiences. My voice was important. but there were also times when I had to be silent. There's a tightrope sometimes that you have to walk. Sometimes your voice is quiet and authoritative at the same time. Exact opposites in the same body, but impactful and insightful as well. You have to train your voice to be these things. Train your voice. You train your voice by reading what others have written. You train your voice by listening to what others say. You train your voice by learning things from TV or the media. You train your voice by listening to podcasts and influencers. You don't just watch the news, but you take deep dives into what the other side says. And you find the truth that sits in the middle, because it's never one or the other. There's always a middle. And sometimes the middle doesn't get heard. Begin to recognize when it might be time to move away from people who don't want you to use your voice. I don't mean run. I mean take a step. Listen to what they say. Are they trying to hold you and your voice back? If your voice has to be heard, then move away. You don't have to run. You can move one step at a time. And eventually, you'll continue to be where you need to be. So lesson 3, speak with your voice. Speak with your voice. Your voice, not somebody else's. As you begin to listen to your mind and retrain your voice, you will begin to feel that it's time to speak with your voice. Practice speaking with your voice on paper. Do your ideas sound different? Has your mindset changed about some things? Do you want to spend time in a different way than you did before? Have you practiced being courteous if you used to be rude? Have you made the effort not to scream at somebody when you're frustrated? Have you learned to apologize for something that you did wrong instead of just letting it go? Are you working towards your end goal, your purpose? Part of this process is reevaluating who you are and who you want to be. If you don't want to be perceived as someone who is immature, then you need to look at your past actions, determine what that voice sounded like, and what the voice you want to use needs to sound like. It's an excellent writing exercise. Use your voice wisely. Sometimes it's better not to speak up if you hear your old voice rising up until you get it under control. That means you have to listen to yourself and you have to think about what's coming out of your mouth. If you watch TV, you can practice there. In a place where you would have been one character, take on the role of the other and use your newfound voice. Use a journal or a composition book and write down what the new voice would say. I had to learn to write first. When an injustice occurs or occurred, I write my response. I take the time to make sure what happens as well as what could have happened, and then I take my writing to the appropriate person. And I usually get heard because I try not to be selfish with my voice. I try to look out for anybody else who could have the same problem that I have. So it's not just about me, mine, or my family, but I share from that point of view. I dash off letters and emails, but I let my calm voice talk. She, the calm voice, talks regardless of if we're in the hospital and something went wrong, if we're dealing with educators at school, if we're talking about inconsistencies in how business is handled, because she, the calm voice, knows that calm gets her further than cussing and gets her further than screaming and yelling. And she, the calm voice, can affect change not only for herself, but for others. Cussing normally gets me stuff just for me. And it gets nasty comments left behind me. So if I have to come back, I've burned a bridge. My voice doesn't like to burn bridges. I want you to remember these three things. What's your end goal? What's your purpose? What legacy do you want to leave behind? Because remember, you will leave a legacy for your family and friends, for your community, and for the world. 2, you have to train your voice. You've been doing it all your life. Is it the one you want? If not, train it to be the voice that you need it to be. To achieve, number 1, your purpose and your end goal. You're still running the race of life, and your voice needs to reflect that. And number 3, remember to speak with your voice. As you practice it, it'll get stronger and stronger. And if you stay silent, then the legacy and purpose you leave behind will be silence. Don't freeze. Just keep moving forward. And finally, be gentle with yourself and your voice. As your voice grows, you'll fall back into old habits. When that happens, just pick it up and keep moving forward. Use your voice for good. Let it guide you forward to the purpose that you were created for and the legacy that you want to leave behind. Let your voice speak for you and for others, loud and clear. I'm Carmen Cawthon with Research and Resource. Thank you.